Are you interested in creating some new voices? Welcome, scholars, storytellers, and fellow babysitter DMs. This is a Level Up Corner, led by yours truly, Wizo, as we delve into all the tips and tricks about Dungeons & Dragons. Today's topic is voices. Now, voices are given a bit more credit than what people think, and they're also discredited more than what people should discredit them towards. Kind of contradictory statements, I know, a little confusing in the beginning, but let me explain. People value voices quite a bit, especially since Critical Role or listening to other DMs who have DM'd for about 20 years or some ridiculous amount, maybe even professional voice actors. And people attribute their DM's attributes to those professionals, those people who have practiced. And your DM who has been DMing 2 to 3 years or who has just started is not going to be as good as someone who has DM'd for 20 years, gotten bored in some areas and experimented with voices, or is a professional voice actor. That's just not going to happen. So the newer DMs who have been unfairly compared to these DMs who have refined their craft over the years, have also stated that voices are overused and that voices are not that important and don't add too much to the game. But let's go over this. Let's give 3 examples, and you can decide for yourself which is best and which matters. You walk into a tavern. A short, gruff dwarf comes to greet you. Hi, what are you buying? You walk into a tavern as a short, stout dwarf greets you. Hi, what can I get you? You walk into a tavern as a short, stout dwarf comes to greet you. Hi, what can I get you? Now, in those 3 examples, you probably noticed something. The first one, I didn't use a voice, but it was more engaging than the third option. And the second one, combining all the best aspects of using a voice, was the most engaging. Using voices is actually a good thing. It can enhance your game overall. It can make your game more interesting, and you can liven up your world with different character voices. But these voices are not the most important thing when it comes to interaction. The third example, where I just spoke to you in a different voice and I didn't move my eyes or anything or even move my hands, it was eerie, unnerving. And even if I do have a good character voice, well, that's not all there is to it. In order to make a game more interesting, you need to work on the basics. You need to have the descriptions there that we had in all the examples, but you also need to make sure that you interact and engage with your fellow players or with your fellow friends. Make sure that you have that facial expression. You lean in when you want to draw them in. You have your arms and hands move to give that living motion so that this character isn't just a piece of cardboard that is speaking to you. It's a living, breathing person. And that's more important than getting character voices. So in a sense, it is understandable that voices are not everything. But as you saw in that second example, they do add a little bit to the atmosphere. And with that, let's figure out how to create some voices. Now, the easiest way to create new voices is to not focus on accents. I had a bit more of a Scottish accent there, but as you saw, it already kind of like twisted and turned when I was getting into it. If I go, hi, how are you doing? Then that's like a Scottish or Irish or whatever accent that I stick with. But if you try to do a British accent, oh yeah, Gona, how you doing? Or some strange thing. I'm not as proficient with a British accent. You have to focus on different vernacular trends. There are also different accents based upon where you are in the country. And there's a generalization to these accents that if you get it wrong, it will feel awkward and clunky, especially if you keep changing your voice. For example, if, I'm talking like this here, and it's all good, eh? There was already a few different changes there, and it was kind of unnerving a little bit because I couldn't keep my consistency. Rather than going over all these rules for each accent, memorizing them, and trying to keep the consistency for them, oh my goodness, that's a lot of work, you could just use your own voice. There are different tones that we use when we speak. We don't always speak in a monotone voice when speaking to others. This is unnerving. There is a bit more passion into it at times. Sometimes you have to be a bit more angry with a deeper and grumblier voice. And you can already tell that I'm not having accents. I am adjusting my voice. And here's some ways to do it. You can think of, first off, if you want to go high or low. Are you trying to make a voice that's really high? Like I'm trying to push it up here, almost up into my forehead is where I'm focusing my voice to be. Or I can make it a bit more nostrily by focusing on my nose. I can make it a bit more rumbly with my mouth focusing on that. Or I can make it a bit more deep already by focusing on how deep I want my voice to come from. I mean, you can practice with this. This is actually very easy. A deep voice is a lot easier for me. You could also have it be a bit more rumbly. You feel the vibrations in your mouth when you do it. And a bit more nostrily if you go with your nose. Higher is harder, like up here. But you could have this for a timid, shy person. Now, that's already where your voice is coming from. But you can also adjust the volume of it. You could have a loud, boisterous person. Or you could have a little bit of a, quieter and less, more shady person here. They both came from my throat. And the latter probably was a little bit harder to hear on video. But you could hear that it's a little bit more different than the person who is a bit more authoritative. Those give two completely different personalities. Someone who's a bit more shy and forlorn, while someone else who's more aggressive and intimidating. You've already adjusted that with your volume of your voice. You can also have a lower volume here with the nostril, but are you going to have a really high and annoying person here? And that's what you can do with your volume, just with your nose and how nasally you want the voice to sound. But there's some other easy ways that we can adjust our voice. You could also have a lot more breath to it. Let's go with that deep voice. If you have a sharp and coarse voice like this with not much breath behind it, it is more aggressive. But if you have a more breathy person, the voice is more calculated. It seems a bit more different. And you can see that there are two completely different personalities based on the amount of breath you put into it. You can try to combine these traits as well. You can combine speed, terseness, kind of is what you get from your speed, your breath to it, and the area in which you place your the focus of your voice. With this already, you've gained like 36 different voices. You could go from there. But you can also practice on some other common voices that you've heard. Yeah, you've heard of the old grandpa, correct? What's up there, young whippersnapper? Think of that. Think of how I made that voice. You can deconstruct voices that you hear in the real world and make them your own quite easily. That isn't accented in any way. That is me having my voice focus towards the back of my mouth, making it very breathy, as stated, making it a bit more, maybe medium volume, but it's a bit more breathy, and it's kind of combined like in between the deep parts of my neck and my mouth to about here, young whippersnapper. So you get the idea. If you listen to someone speak in a interesting way, you can try to replicate it as long as it's not an accent. Accents are a lot harder. You can eventually get to accents. Those are the next level, but each accent is unique and different. Just don't feel like you have to focus on accents. And don't feel like doing voices is something that is very restrictive and hard to do. Anyone can do voices, and it's not as hard as you think. If you just focus on where your voice is and you practice it a little bit, you might find that doing voices is actually easier than you would have thought. But now we get to the other important part with voices. Consistency with your voices. This is a problem that happens a lot when DMs try to start giving voices. They have a gruff individual who goes to speak to the players, and they're able to keep that gruffness in the same voice when talking to them as this entire time. But then a few sessions pass. And the players go back to Gruffy McGrufferson. You go, oh yeah, he's a bit gruff in here, and he's talking to you. Those are two completely different voices. If you don't believe me, then just go back and hear the difference in tone. The second voice was a bit higher up. It had a lot of the rumbliness to it. the reverberation while focusing in this area of my mouth. But it also went a little bit higher between my mouth and my nose is where it felt that it was around this area is where I focused a lot of that tone and rumble and volume. There was also like some weird Scottish accent that kind of was pushed into it. And this happens when your players decide to go back and visit an NPC that you haven't seen. You don't remember their voice offhand and you kind of screwed up and your players kind of look at you odd like, that's not how they sounded. You say, oh, of course they did. Anyways, back to it. And you just try to continue with that voice or readjust. When trying to come back to these characters, what I have found most importantly is to write notes. If you have to come up with a character on the spot, make sure you have their name written down. That's important. And also give in parentheses some characteristics. Anything that helps you recall it. For example, mid-high, rumble, deep. Does that mean anything to you? Well, it might not to you, but to me, it tells me that it's at that mid-high portion is a bit rumbly because it's from the mouth and it's a little bit deeper tone that I'm trying to get. You could even put an aggressive or something else, and that could be for voice notes. You could do this preemptively with some of their characters as well. You could have the, oh, hello there, which is kind of to this side of my mouth, getting a lot more higher tone, a bit in that same mouth area and reverberating, but it kind of curls up is how I feel it. And you can write in your notes whatever you want to help you recall it, but make sure that you have some consistency to your voices. It is very difficult, but with just a little bit of work, you can add voices to your game, elevate it to that next level, and also make it so that it's consistent and not completely changing every single time. Now, the last thing I want to tell you about voices is that, and I want you to know that if this is the first time for you doing voices, make sure to tell your group, hey, I'm going to attempt voices and everything else, and it may not be the best, but we're just going to have fun with it. Your group is generally very understanding when you are attempting new voices, and you'll slowly get better and better over time, till eventually you become a master, as long as you have fun with it. And don't stress too much. Voices are there to make the game more fun and more interesting. And that's how we ultimately elevate our D&D games, is to make them more fun, interesting, and alive. Now, don't let me be the only one to comment on voices. I would love to hear your thoughts on voices down in the comment section down below. Are there some other easy tips that you have? I am always trying to improve aspects of my DMing, and I would love to hear if you have any other easy ways to help improve voices. Lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe this video so that you can stay up to date on more tips and tricks. Always remember that your players love and appreciate you. This has been Wizo, and keep rolling, my friends. Keep rolling.